Hello, friends. I'm Kathy Fay, Executive Director of the Boston Early Music Festival, or BEMF, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special pre-concert talk preparatory to the opening concert of our 2023-2024 season. Before I introduce our two guests, let me just say that all of us at BEMF are thrilled to be presenting the combined talents of Cappella Pratensis, making their long-awaited BEMF debut, and Sollazzo Ensemble, fresh from their enthralling festival debut this past June in Boston. Both of these ensembles have won critical acclaim for their consummate virtuosity and passionate performances, and this opening concert will be no exception. The performance takes place on Friday, October 13th at 8 p.m. in the glorious sanctuary of First Church Cambridge Congregational, located at 12 Garden Street in the heart of Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. It is my pleasure to introduce Stratton Bull, Director and Superius of Cappella Pratensis, which many listeners will know in early vocal music is the name given to the highest voice part in the ensemble, as well as Peter de Laurentiis, tenor and artistic producer of Cappella Pratensis. Welcome, Stratton and Peter.
Thanks so much.
You've prepared a veritable musical feast for those of us lucky enough to attend your performance next Friday night, October 13th, and we're looking forward to hearing you talk a little bit about the program. Meanwhile, tickets for our opening performance of Cappella Pratensis and Sollazzo Ensemble are still available and can be purchased by visiting the BEMF website at bemf.org or by calling the BEMF office at 617-661-1812. For those unable to attend our in-person performance on Friday, October 13th, virtual tickets are also on sale. Our virtual presentation premieres on Saturday, October 28th at 8 p.m. and will be available for a 2-week period from Saturday, October 28th at 8 through Saturday, November 11th at 11:59 p.m. So with that, I will now disappear from the screen and turn the microphone over to Stratton and Peter, who will share a bit more about this very special program. Thank you for watching this pre-concert talk, and I look forward to seeing you at the concert on Friday the 13th.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Thanks for that nice welcome. And greetings to you all from Leuven. I'm sitting in just outside the city, this Belgian city with this ancient university that's a little bit east of Brussels, where Peter is, right?
Exactly. Greetings from Brussels.
We'll be getting together here where I am in Leuven next week to prepare the concert. And of course, we're really, really looking forward to our making our debut there in Boston. And we're especially excited to be bringing this particular concert because it's got a pretty rich story connected to it, right, Peter?
Absolutely, yes. And an interesting one.
Yeah, maybe we can back it up a little bit to the context for this whole concert, because it's a pretty great story. Our group is based in the Netherlands. Actually, we're both in Belgium now, but well, we're in Brabant, which is was a great duchy, was a very wealthy part of the world, and there was no Belgium and the Netherlands back in those days. So we consider ourselves to be ambassadors of the Duchy of Brabant, but our headquarters is actually in the north part of Brabant, in the city of 's-Hertogenbosch. And there's a great story that goes with 's-Hertogenbosch, which has to do with a confraternity, which is an expensive word, but it's a devotional organization. And I don't know, maybe you could give us a little background, Peter, about their musical tradition within this organization.
Yes, absolutely. So this organization, the Confraternity of Our Illustrious Lady is the official name, was founded in 1317 or 18, according to, depending on which document we're looking at. But anyway, so it's a very old organization that still exists. And it is a very interesting one because it still keeps a very rich archive of not only historic documents, but also music manuscripts, and in particular choir books that contain polyphony, but also chant books, plain chant books. So because of this very rich musical tradition that still is kept in the archives of the organization, we have embarked in a 5-year project to study and to perform the music that was created for the confraternity, or at least at the confraternity, because we know that, for example, they bought some choir books from other centers where these choir books were being copied and created. So, Stratton, should we say something about the larger project before we give some details about this? Do you want to give an introduction about that?
Sure. I mean, so one of the things that turns us on about this business with these choir books, and I don't know if the word choir book means something to someone, but they're big honking music sources, because the performers in those days, they didn't have their own little photocopied scores to hold on to. They in the church, they sang from one big book, everybody grouped around one big stand and a book. And that's what we do in Cappella Pratensis. We're slightly fanatic when it comes to trying to recreate conditions of the performance conditions of the time. And so we do the same thing. We make facsimiles of the choir books, and we stand in a group around the stand, at least for the liturgical pieces. So of course, having a source, there's 7 beautiful manuscripts and two more printed choir books that are available in this rich archive that they have, is like a gold mine for us. And we've been tunneling into it over the past years, and we've performed it over many years, but we've got this particular 5-year plan on it at the moment, of which the Feast from the Swan, or the Feast of the Swan, is the 4th edition. Each one is a focused project with concerts, with educational aspects to it, with academic aspects to it. For instance, one of the parts that we're actually having some of these choir books facsimile to scale, books being made with beautiful leather-bound covers on them. This is in connection with the university here where I am at Leuven, the Alamire Foundation. So there's got a lot of moving parts. I think we'd be here for a couple of hours if we told you the whole story, but just to say, this concert is part of a big story that we're kind of tunneling into these sources. In the past we've done masses, Mary Magdalene devotion, the Marian devotion, different aspects of the liturgy. Yes, that's right. The St. John. We're going to finish with a Christmas program, but this one is a little bit special within the 5, wouldn't you say, Peter?
Absolutely. Actually, it's a very interesting aspect, because when you look at the books of music from this time, you could have the first impression is that they only performed sacred music, right? Because almost all of this repertoire, the written repertoire, is actually sacred music. But that is actually not true. So one interesting aspect of this repertoire is that most of the secular music was practice-based. So it was not less important, it was not less present, but we have fewer sources of it, so to speak. So because one of the main interests of Cappella Pratensis is also the practice, the original practice of this repertoire, and trying to understand how things were done in detail. And sometimes we go into so much detail as to spend a lot of time trying to understand how the manuscripts were actually copied. One of our singers is a very good and excellent calligrapher. and he has recreated manuscripts of this repertoire for us to perform from, or also how these books were bound, the binding, the actual binding of the books. So very, very detailed things. And obviously, we are also very interested in how this music was performed. So, for example, one aspect that we are very curious and interested in is the extemporization of polyphony. We know that musicians and singers at the time were very used to and very well at ease in extemporizing polyphony, something that today we have almost completely lost as a practice. So we try and engage with this kind of practice. And we realized that for this project, we were concentrating almost exclusively on the sacred music, because that's what they're keeping there. But then looking at the archival documents, you find all these references to one particular moment which happened every day and which was called the Feast of the Swan.
Every year.
Sorry, every year. Sorry. Maybe every day would have been a bit much. Yeah. Maybe you want to say something about this.
Yeah. So one of the challenges of these choir books is that indeed it's all sacred music. But we know from these records, and by the way, that's one of the great things about this organization. They had very detailed account books and records, so we can really trace in quite minute detail what they were up to, which singers were hired, how much wine they bought. They bought some instruments, so we know they had string instruments at their disposal. And then they had once a year this Feast of the Swan. Well, what's the deal with this? They had many parties through the year, but this was the big one. And what made it special was one member of this confraternity each year was designated that they had to supply a whole roast swan for the banquet. And you can imagine it would be piped in and with all kinds of festivities. And this person would be known as the Swan brother. And the Swan brothers became a designation for the most important members of this organization, which, by the way, as Peter said, it still exists. So we're talking about it's more than 700 years old, and the Swan brothers are still doing their thing. They don't actually eat swan. Apparently, we've been told it's not a good look to be seen eating swan nowadays. So we're not actually going to have a roast swan at the concert, unfortunately, but in some virtual way, the swan will be present. But this is where the Feast of the Swan comes from, the name of it. And this would have been their moment to let their hair down a little bit, not to be singing all sacred music. So we had to come up with a way to imagine what the repertoire would be, because, as Peter said, there isn't a corpus of sources for this stuff. I mean, there is music. There are part books for this kind of repertoire. Let's say French songs or Flemish songs at the time, but we had to kind of get clever, and we came up with a plan, right, Peter?
Yes, yes, exactly. So one interesting element is that sometimes the repertoire, that even the sacred repertoire at this time, was actually composed by imitating or at least quoting some polyphonic model that could be a motet or another mass, but could also be a secular song. So in the collection of the Brotherhood, we have a number of choir books that contain masses that are based on secular polyphonic models. So that was maybe the most obvious way for us to see where some secular music appeared, even in the sources that we had at our disposal. So what we did was we looked at those these masses, and we decided to perform the secular models that were used to parody the polyphony in the masses, and that was one of the ways we found to set up this repertoire. So, for example, there are a number of songs. One is a French song by Loisé Compère, Dites-moi toutes vos pensées, on which Jean Mouton, famous composer of the time, and also the composer of, I think, 8 masses in one of the books, on which he based a mass that we're not going to perform, because we know from the sources that a certain amount of sacred music was performed. We know that some Ave Marias were sung. Actually, there's a mention of 3 Ave Marias being sung at the beginning and at the end of the banquet. So we do that. And then we have a number of secular pieces, and usually they're sacred mass movements that are based on those secular pieces. Maybe, Stratton, you want to mention some of them in particular?
Sure. First of all, just the idea of having a mass movement at a party might seem strange to us. It's a little bit of a downer, maybe, but that's not how they saw things. We know that when people did music making at home outside the church setting, they were singing all kinds of stuff, including religious music, motets, and movements out of masses. So that'd be quite a normal thing to do. Now, you'd probably do them a little bit differently than you would in church. And that brings in our wonderful partners, Sollazzo Ensemble, which is, well, for those of you who were at the concert in June, you'll know about them already. But these guys have created a whole new way to think about this music and hear this. At least that's how I see them. They're a phenomenal group that they've got this kind of mix between their playing historical instruments. They're so into creating the same conditions that were in the original performances. So they're early music, if you want to call it that. In that sense, their credentials are impeccable, but they have a way of creating sound worlds around all the pieces that they make that kind of takes you into a new zone. That's my feeling with them. So we're so excited to be working with them together, and we've recorded this program actually already. So we've worked quite intensively together. But just to say, for instance, we take a mass movement, let's say a Sanctus, which has a big opening Sanctus. It's very rich. We're doubling in voices with instruments. Things that are considered not done, it's got to be a cappella. But no, this is all bets are off now. We're at a party, people are having something nice to drink, maybe, and you're entertaining with this music at the same time as you're being respectful with it. But for instance, in the Sanctus, you have then the smaller movements like the Pleni Sunceli or the Benedictus, which we've turned into these sound worlds with combinations of string instruments and flutes and voices, and Anna Danilevskaya, the director, she's a master at weaving voices and instruments together. So we take these church pieces and turn them into something. I'm not going to say worldly, but maybe otherworldly is the right word. Just to give one example, and this is a pretty cool part of the whole concert. There is a mass called the Missa Ik had een boelken uitverkoren. For those who don't speak Middle Dutch, that means I chose a sweetie pie for myself. And it's a Dutch song, and there's a big repertoire of Dutch songs at this time. What's interesting is that we don't have the song anymore. It's been lost. But we have what they call a contrafact, a religious song, which is based on it. It said this is based on the tune. So we have the tune. We don't have the words. Well, we got actually Mark Bunel, that Peter was talking about, what a great calligrapher he is. He's actually also a great composer, and he can write polyphony. And he has recreated the 4-part song on which the Mass is based by looking at how the Mass takes the melody and plays with it. And so this is going to be like a world premiere, well, North American premiere, let's say, of this song. It's a recreation, but completely in the spirit of how they would have done these things. And there's also no text. We only have the first little bit of the text. Well, a Dutch poet, Erik Alink, has recreated the text for us, and he's actually made a rather Nazi text about an encounter between a lover and a swan, and it gets pretty heated at some points. Anyway, you'll see how it goes. It's actually a lot of fun. You'll have to watch your translation carefully. Anyway, we will sing that song, and then we'll sing the Mass that it's based on. Maybe just you give a rough view of the rest of the program. It carries on with this kind of mix of sacred and secular, right?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe just to finish off with mentioning something about that great Mass, which is Ich hatte einen Vulkan, which, by the way, in the manuscript is not called Ich hatte einen Vulkan, but it's called the Missa Benedicti. So actually, it's almost sure that the composer is Benedictus Appenzeller, and it ends with this astonishing Agnus Dei. So we shouldn't think that because the Mass is based on a very simple, a bit folky tune in a way, the writing of the Mass is also simple and easy, because actually, for example, the very last Agnus Dei is a quite spectacular quadruple inversion canon, where...
What?
Okay, so let me try and explain this. Maybe correct me if I don't get it right. But what happens is that in the manuscript, you see that 4 voices are written, 1 on each side. So 2 per page in the opening of the manuscript, because the parts are separated. And you must know that 4 singers have to read their line as it is written, but other 4 singers have to read it backwards. So starting from the end and going backwards until the beginning of each line, which gives as a result an 8-part movement in canon, but with 4 voices in inversion. Did I explain it?
Nicely done. I mean, I knew what it was already, but I think folks will get a rough idea what you're talking about. It's spectacular. And if you want to listen to it, since you guys are getting the inside information on this stuff, of course, there's a moment when they meet in the middle, because you're starting each from one side, and then it crosses, and there's a little moment of silence. It's sort of like the seam of the piece where everything just kind of hangs on, and then everybody proceeds back to the end. But indeed, it's spectacular, and of course, this is typical of the music of this time, playing with upside down and backwards and canons and all kinds of tricks. It's that puzzle riddle culture that's a big part of the music of this time, and they did it in church, and for sure they did it in concerts as well. So we've got, well, you can see the program, I think, and other masses that are based on songs, some pure songs, some beautiful instrumental pieces as well. So what we're bringing here is we're evoking the musical structure of one of these events. And we will have a little bit of a sense of festivities because of our master ceremonies. Maybe we can finish by just giving a little tip about how that's going to be, Peter. Well, we don't even know in a way, Peter, but what do you think we've got waiting for us?
Oh, I think we'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the idea is that one of our singers, Andrew Hallock, will also be our master of ceremonies. And he will make some introductions and some short explanations about how the banquet will work. And maybe there's another piece that we should mention, Stratton, and that is the Sicut Lilium, don't you think?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Sure.
I can. So there is this very nice and quite concise, quite short motet, Sicut Lilium inter spinas, by Antoine Brumel, and that was an obvious choice in a way for this program, because even though it does not appear in the sources of the Brotherhood, it was the confraternities, the Brotherhood's motto. So it appears in the coat of arms of the confraternity, but also on the pewter jugs that the Swan brothers were supposed to use at this particular feast. So so that was a pretty obvious choice, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, totally. So anyway, Andrew will guide us through the evening. He's very much into what he calls the immersive qualities of this music, and he tends to take it out of the box a little bit. So it won't get too crazy, I don't think, but he will, let's say, he gets the wonderful otherworldliness of this music, and trying to unlock what's going on in a lot of these pieces, because one thing about this repertoire is it sounds wonderful, it's harmonious, it's sweet and nice, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you might not necessarily get right away. So he's going to introduce us into that world and make sure everybody's on the same wavelength. So that gives you a rough idea of what's going on. I hope you got that people have a sense of the festivities of it, of the richness of the music, even without the roast swan. I mean, if you want to go and roast a swan yourself afterwards, then you can get in the mood that way. But anyway, we're really, really looking forward to bringing this program to Boston, and look forward to seeing you.